Heather for Jess.
Go for Jess.
Can you switch to two?
Switching.
Hey, I'm Heather.
And I'm Jess.
We're two multi-hyphenate creatives figuring it out in real time.
From on set and in the studio to deadlines, pivots, side hustles, and starting over.
We talk about the messy, brilliant, behind-the-scenes reality of working in production, broadcast content, and everything in between.
Tune in for fresh tea, hot takes, industry guests, and the occasional chaos.
This is Switching To, the side channel for creative conversations.
We're glad you're here.
All right, we're on to.
Hi, Heather.
Hi, Jess.
How's it going?
It's going great. I am once again so excited to be here with you on the pod. And I think we should commemorate this moment because this is a first recording since officially going live with our podcast. Do you want to talk about that?
Yay! I'm so proud of us. Yeah, we launched our podcast two days ago now. 2 days ago? 2 days ago.
Yeah.
By the time this comes out, it'll be a few days from now or a few weeks from now or something. But gosh, we've been working on this for what, 6 months?
Excited.
Yeah. But we're super grateful for everyone that supported us. All of our guests that we've recorded with so far that you're going to get to hear from in the next several episodes.
Our future guests to come.
Our future guests. We're super grateful for everyone that supported us. I mean, we had listeners who weren't listeners submit listener episodes, stuff like we're so grateful for everybody that supported us. And
yeah,
so
much
excited
gratitude for the response. Like everyone has just been super supportive on social and following us and liking and subscribing and all that good stuff. So thank you to everyone. It's amazing to see like the community come out.
Our hearts are so warmed.
Yeah.
Our hearts are so warmed.
Speaking of hearts being warmed.
Yeah, you know what? Today's episode is heartwarming because Jessica, our guest Jessica, is a pretty amazing person. Do you want to tell us a little bit about her?
Yeah, so we're talking to Jessica Sherman on the pod today. She's an award-winning casting director. She's a proud Los Angeles native, and she has worked on some pretty incredible projects. She got her start under the mentorship of April Webster. So she worked on a ton of J.J. Abrams films like Star Wars, The Force Awakens, Super 8. And then in 2017, she launched her own casting company where she's championed fresh voices and diverse talent in projects like Sundance Darling Slight, Tribeca Favorite Thumper, Amazon's gripping limited series Tell Me Your Secrets, Disney Plus's epic series Willow, a ton of other stuff. But in addition to that, Jessica also co-hosts the podcast Tipsy Casting, now in its 3rd season. And she is the founder of a nonprofit called A Cause for Entertainment, which supports women and families affected by breast cancer. So we will definitely talk about that. You'll hear about Jessica's passion for creativity, connection, and giving back, which really defines her not just as a casting director, but as a force for change in the industry and beyond.
I'm excited for everybody to hear about her journey. Jessica's, the journey that she made in her career and how she's such an innovative person.
Yes, she got told no a lot. As she tells us in her stories, like she went for something and someone told her no, so she found another way to go about it, and she really carved her own path in this industry in so many different ways and shares a lot of insights for actors and really great information.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because I don't come from the casting world. I don't come from commercial and narrative and stuff like that. And so just kind of understanding what her job looks like, what her day-to-day looks like, what the process for getting into casting is like, it's so, I feel like it's a part of the industry that not a lot of people know about. Like a lot of people are like, yeah, this is what a director does, or this is what an editor does.
Yeah, there's a lot of mystique or some, I think myths about working in casting, which Jessica talks about. And, I think we even just within the industry, sometimes we don't have a full understanding of what another department does, or, we're in production and someone's more in pre-production. So it's really awesome to, I think, hear from different individuals in the industry about what they do, because I think it just makes us all closer and better at our jobs.
Absolutely. Let's get into it.
Let's do it. Hi, Jessica. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, welcome.
Thanks
We're
for
so happy
being
to have
here.
you.
For the purposes of this, just for clarification, so we have Jessica Sherman on the pod today, and we also have Jess, who you guys know is our host. So I think we'll say Jess and then Jessica for clarity for everyone. Well, we're super excited to just dive in today. But Jessica, would you like mind just giving a quick intro of who you are, a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I am a Los Angeles native, grew up, born and raised here. I got into the industry right out of college and worked at a voiceover agency for 2 years and then started my foray into casting. And since then, I have been in casting for almost 16 years, a little bit all over the place in terms of my resume, film, television, pilot series, indie, all over the place, basically.
Amazing.
And she has a podcast too.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
podcast host, nonprofit founder. I think you left some stuff out, but we'll get to all of
I
that.
forget about it. But yes, podcast host as well. I co-host with another casting director, Jen Presser, a podcast called Tipsy Casting, where we drink booze and talk about the industry. And it's been a lovely journey.
That's awesome. That's so cool. You do so many different things. I mean, I was looking into more into your website and I was just like, oh my gosh, she's involved with so many things, even more than what I had known that you were involved in, which is really cool. And I want to get into that. But I kind of want to start a little bit at the beginning. If you would take us back to when you were starting your career, did you know that you wanted to build a career in this business, or was it something that sort of you found or found you, or, was there like a defining moment in all of this?
Yeah, I think I definitely didn't know about casting, period. Like it was a career. Grew up in a town that was like had a very heavy music scene, and so sort of across the board and through the arts of like I am tone deaf and can't play any instrument, so I wasn't a doer, but I was a spectator. So yeah, I grew up thinking like, or the dream of dreams was to do A&R, which is discovering new musicians, but I also had no way into that space. But I was the kid that would always, I think it's every Thursday, you'd go to Walmart and you see what DVDs were out, or, pre-times of VHS, and then, and what music came out. Everything came out on the same day. And so that would be my go-to. And so I just sort of naturally was always surrounded by it. But my family, my parents are originally from Ukraine. And so the immigrants journey of working your ass off and then making sure your children pick suitable paths of stability and necessity was definitely the sort of expectation. And so I went to school, I studied business and economics, and my dad had all sorts of plans for me, which I threw out the window. And my there was a friend of the family she was like very successful in international distribution, and having somebody in that space sort of made it seem more attainable to have like an entry point. And so I she had at some point offered me an internship, and I only found out this year. I All this time I thought she just like disappeared when it was time to get the internship. I learned this year that my dad actually passed on the internship on my behalf because he was like, she's graduating from college, she's not working for free, not having no clue how this business works.
Stop it.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a very interesting conversation to have with my family.
Wait. So she offered you the internship, but then your dad passed on your behalf,
Yeah, and
unbeknownst to you.
all this time I thought she just like disappeared. And yeah, so that was fun. But even with all that said, like I was like, you know what, this is my time to figure out what I want to do, and or to go on the path, that was laid out for me in some ways. And so I decided to go, and I got an internship at a different international distribution company and at a voiceover agency. And it became very clear that the international distribution company hired me to basically move their office for them as an intern. And then the voiceover agency was sort of like the place that I discovered my love of working with actors. And they had originally hired me for data entry, and then about I want to say a month into it, they hired me as their office manager. And so I was, seeing these great actors every day, and it's such a different community than theatrical because it's like it has nothing to do with your face or your looks or anything like that. And it's very difficult to replicate something somebody has done with their voice. Like it's uniquely them, you know? So I think I got a really cool education on the community. And because also voiceover has the agents have autonomy from casting directors in a way that they don't in theatrical. So I got to see sort of like the casting process happen within the agency bubble, essentially. And so for me, I think 6 months into it, I was like, I don't want to be an agent, but I do love actors. And so it took me about a year and a half to break into it, but I eventually had to go back and be an intern as an intern in casting because you couldn't make a lateral move. And so I got my big break about a year and a half in.
This might be skipping ahead a little bit, but can you talk a little bit about the difference in casting for voiceover versus theatrical?
Yeah, I mean, voiceover. So the process with voiceover is we would release a breakdown and then the agencies decide who they're going to submit on their roster, like the actual audition, who they will submit to that for that role. And so it's most of the agencies will sort of like self-eliminate. They will have, 15, 20 actors audition for the role and then they'll before they send it out, they will eliminate the weakest links essentially and then send their strongest choices. For theatrical, we get the decision of who is going to audition for it. It's a little bit more, I think, not to say that voiceover casting directors don't have this as well, but like, our knowledge of actors and their breadth of work and what their like their growth and sort of timeline of things is a very expansive space for us. And so we take control of the creative process a bit more than I think VO casting directors do.
That's so interesting, just kind of how it's a similar but different process.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, in voiceover, you can also make requests of like, oh, I know certain actors who are very right for this, having seen them or heard them over and over again. But normally it's like you can do your special request and then they just send in whoever else. But I will say having the voiceover experience come before the theatrical casting process, I absorb auditions differently, I think, than most casting directors because whenever I'm watching a tape, I will most often listen to it first to see if it sounds organic. Like, is this the way that people really speak? Does it sound natural? Does it? So I listen and then watch.
Oh, that's so interesting. I think
Yeah.
what's cool too is you were at an agency, and but because it was voiceover, you were like developing a lot of those skills, as a casting, because you're kind of making those choices or those calls at the agency side. So that's interesting. Like, I didn't really think about that. Sometimes as actors, we don't like dissect all of those little like things. So that's really cool and interesting. So you were at the voiceover agency, and then you had this feeling of like, okay, I want to go into casting. I don't want to be an agent, which I've heard a lot of people
Yeah.
say that. I didn't want to go to that side.
Yeah.
You didn't want to be a representation. And so then what was the pathway from there like for you?
So basically, I did everything that I believe actors had done at some point of like, sending out greeting cards and doing building a website and, trying everything. And, and none of it worked because I think in hindsight, they probably thought I was an actor trying to build a relationship with them under the
Mm.
facade of casting rather than someone who was actually interested in casting. So the last thing, my last ditch effort was I started crashing actor workshops to meet casting associates and directors. And that was the thing that worked. And so there was this associate who he's no longer in the business, but he took me under his wing and he basically anytime he was casting a commercial or a short film he would let me sit in and I would just absorb whatever I could through osmosis, just as much as I possibly could. And so I worked with him like evenings and weekends for a year probably of that year and a half. And then he finally called me and he was like, "Hey, I have this movie that I'm an associate on. Like, send me your resume. I think this will be it." I was like, "Great, this is gonna be it." I send it off, and then he calls me 15 minutes later, and he's like, "Just kidding. They want someone with experience. It's a big studio movie, all of that stuff." And so I hung up with him and I called my dad because, I'm from here. And I think at the time I was still living with my parents post college. So I was a commuter from like Lancaster to LA, just to give you a scope. um, and so I called him and I said, listen, if necessary, will you support me for a year if I quit my job and go be an intern? And so he said, yes, but if it doesn't happen in a year, you're going to law school. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's so I just want to backtrack for a second for anyone who's listening who doesn't know the drive to from Lancaster to
Fantastic.
LA. It's like an
It's
hour and a
far.
half, 2 hours on a traffic
good day.
day,
Good day.
on a
Yeah.
good day.
It's
So that's
Yeah.
certainly a commute. And I'm just wondering if how do you get experience then?
Yeah, that's the thing that it's so funny because like since then there's a lot that has happened. That like there was the Sony lawsuit from Black Swan. Like there's like interning became a lot more challenging to get those opportunities, but especially for a casting office. But for me, I was very lucky that like this other associate took me under his wing and like explained everything. He even gave me like, here, do the short film that I can't do, but like all you will have to do is like, do the sort of more administrative stuff. And this will just give you the hands-on experience that you need. So, and then when I finally got into the office for the other, because I called them back and I said, will you take a full-time intern? And they said yes. So I quit my job and I went and I did this internship, which I didn't know how long it would last. But it ended after 9 days. They hired me as their assistant. Thank
oh
God.
wow.
Yes, I
That's
got very lucky.
amazing.
Yeah. And so I guess I proved myself that that I at least have the hunger to learn. Um, so they hired me after 9 days. And then a couple weeks into it, I thought I was working on the remake of the movie Little Darlings from like, I think it was like the late 80s, early 90s. And a couple weeks into it, everybody was like, my bosses were running in, freaking out. And they were like, are the lists ready? Are the lists ready? Steven's coming. And I was like, explain what's happening. And that day I learned that I was not working on Little Darlings, but I was working on Super 8 when Steven Spielberg walked in and as the EP on the movie. So it was basically the jackpot of all first jobs.
Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome that you took that risk though, because I mean, I have mixed emotions about this because having done the same thing, like telling people, hi, can I work for free? Like, I'll help you. And having the ability to do that, I think was really so invaluable because same thing kind of happened to me. Like one day somebody handed me a laptop and was like, can you solve this problem right now? And I said, yeah, I think I can fix this problem. By problem, I mean like, an actor not showing up to set and trying to, a producer hands me a
Yeah.
laptop. And then they're like, great, who are you again? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, who are you? Can we hire you? And so I think like, I know there's more restrictions than there needs to be to protect people, but I also think at the same time, there's something to be said about just getting in and having the experience without the pressure to be able to just learn and absorb because our industry is so much about learning from others. It's more of a
Yeah.
trade than anything,
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think, I realized I was in a very privileged position to be able to have somebody to fall back on, worst case scenario. But I do agree, it's like there's got to be more or fewer barriers of entry. So I think it's, you know, even if you're in college or not in college and trying to find the balance of things. And I think there are more programs that are being built and existence now than there were ever when I was coming up, that's for sure. So, I think there are opportunities for people that don't have that ability to like fall back on somebody.
Yeah, for sure. What would you say to some, and this may also be jumping ahead, but I just wonder, I know the landscape is so different and maybe you can talk about that. I've heard from a lot of different, casting offices that they don't have a physical office and they're casting some of the biggest projects there are. And I know that does make it hard to have interns or shadow. I mean, you can. I've worked with interns that are virtual, but it's just a little bit more difficult. So, like, what are some of the ways if somebody wants to maybe pursue a career in casting, some suggestions for like areas to to start for them?
Well, I would always say, like, I didn't have this experience, but I know a lot of other casting people did, that they'd started as PAs and sort of built their relationships through like being in the production office or on set of like meeting the casting director or what have you. But I will say it's a really before I say that, I'll say Casting Society also has a training program that you can sign up for. They host it like they used to do it quarterly. I don't know if it's as often as it had been, but you can go through that. That'll get you a lot of like foundational stuff, and you also get sort of like a certification by the end of it that makes you that puts you sort of like a little bit higher on the totem pole in terms of an entry level position. And then also like CBS has a different program. I think a lot of the studios are developing their own sort of like intern but paid intern positions in order to train the next generation. I will say we are in a really difficult place right now because the scarcity of work is a real thing for every department, not exclusively casting, obviously, but we have that problem. We also have a huge discrepancy in like equitable access to opportunities within the casting community. So what ends up happening is you have like a contingency of 10, 15 casting directors that are taking all of the work. Meanwhile, the rest of the casting directors are basically scraping by. And so this was sort of a problem before, but COVID ultimately exacerbated it because before you can be in a room for however many hours you can be in the room with actors, and that limited the amount of work you could do. Post COVID, when nobody's in the room and everybody is just looking through self tapes, it's endless. You can take as much as you want, basically. So there's a crazy level of gatekeeping that's happening on the studio level that is creating this problem. And so I say all this because, one, it's important for actors to understand that if you, for example, cannot get into Mary Verneu's office, if you don't have a relationship with her, like you're ultimately missing on 150 opportunities a year, right? So if not more, who knows? But so our problem is also the actor's problem. It completely connects us in that space. But also to talk about the support staff, so the hierarchy in a casting office is, if you do have an intern, casting assistant, casting associate, casting director. And so for us, a lot of casting assistants started post 2020. So the idea is that some of these people have never been in a room with actors before, which is the craziest
Wow.
concept, and that idea then sort of escalates as you sort of look at the macro of it, like this is the next generation of
Right.
our craft. And if they've never worked with an actor directly or don't have that like intimate knowledge of like the language that we use and all of that stuff, how are we going to do that?
That's
So
wild.
what are some solutions to that? Like what do you see the future could look like?
I think that, I mean, this is the hard part because the studios are saving money, so they are not pushing to have people back in the office. And the contingency of casting directors that could push to make this happen are the ones that are benefiting the most off of it. So they're not incentivized to get us back in the room. I think it's going to take filmmakers to push back and say, we need this in the room experience. We need to meet actors before we're on set with them, and getting us back in the room is going to be a huge benefit for our people, but also the generation of actors that, like, I just read it. We did a callback session in person with this young actor, and he said that I was his first in person ever. And
Oh,
he's been
wow.
auditioning for like 4 years. And so, like, for me, I need to know, is this actor professional? Is he showing up on time? Like, what's that experience going to be sending him to a set or them to a set? So I think it's like there's a lot that's involved in the casting process that's beyond just finding the best actor for the role. And I think that we've lost that. And like also the connection that we all have. So the hard thing of like building those relationships, I think it's going to take people pushing to get us back in those places. But a lot of people ask me of like, how do actors build relationships with casting directors when they're never in the same room together? And it's honestly, it's like finding authentic ways to connect with those people, because those relationships are going to last longer than somebody that's like feels transactional.
For sure. I would love to hear from you like a little bit more of the technical side of kind of unpacking these different levels in casting, intern, assistant, associate, and cat. Like, how do the responsibilities of each of those kinds of roles sort of differ? Like, what does your job, kind of entail at maybe some of those stages in the process?
Yeah. And granted, it's changed.
Sure.
Intern is always just like sort of the basic things. I mean, when we were in an office, an intern was making sure the room that we would audition in is set up nicely. I mean, it was more about the learning experience and less about the like. At least in the offices that I worked in, it's never about like making interns do grunt work. It was about making sure like the idea is that when you have your next project, you could hire them, right?
Uh-huh.
So that it was about educating them as much as possible, letting them experience the audition process, the administrative side of it, and sort of like seeing the scope of it. So there would be there would be a few things here and there that we would have them do, opening the mail, seeing who those headshots were. Now my interns are just basically readers. And most of the time it's an actor if I have somebody for a reader. But so I don't really have use for an intern right now. And then assistants, it's all administrative. It's scheduling. We have a comprehensive list for each character that we're working on. And so a lot of the time when I was an assistant, I was responsible for that list to make sure every actor we have considered or seen was named on that list with their agency information. And if we have read them, when did we read them? If they taped, if all of those details, session sheets, as much administrative stuff that you could think of, basically a lot of scheduling. And then associate, I was brought up in an office that my boss always told me the casting associate is basically can do the job of a casting director just without the contact. So it's, picking people who would audition, going through the auditions and watching them and making selects, and then the casting director is the same thing plus doing negotiations on deals. I mean, the associate will sometimes do deals as well, but I think for us it's like the relationships and the communication and input that we bring to the creative team for the director or the producer. So it's I feel like I said a lot, but nothing at the same time.
No, that's so interesting. I was telling Heather earlier, like I come from broadcast, and so casting isn't really something that I have a lot of experience in. And Heather and I have been working on some projects this year where she's been doing some casting, but
Yeah.
just like, and so I've kind of started to learn some of the different things that she looks for, and why she makes certain decisions about things. But just you kind of laying out this process and this hierarchy of kind of how somebody comes up to becoming a casting director, what the process looks like. I'm wondering, do you wish there was anything that any misconceptions that you want to address, or anything that you wish people knew about your industry that they don't? And maybe you already shared this in kind of this process.
Yeah, I think I think the really big misconception is like it's us versus them as far as casting versus actors. And that's genuinely not. I mean, I'm not going to say there are not casting directors who aren't the nicest people. They exist just like there are unkind people in every other profession. But it is counterproductive for us to create an uncomfortable environment for actors, because then we can't get the best performance out of those actors if they don't feel safe to do the work. So this notion that we are working against you versus with you, I think is the biggest misconception, because we're tracking your career. We're tracking not only your career, but like your improvement. Maybe you see somebody a couple of times, you're like, well, they're not quite ready, but let's give them a break. Maybe they'll go back to classes. Maybe they'll go do this, that. And then you try them again in, 6 months, a year, whatever it might be. but every person that walks in the proverbial room, we hope that you are the answer to our problem. So I think that's the big one.
Yeah, I just learning, over time as I've grown in my career behind the scenes, how similar casting and actors are to one another. Like they're both kind of these, looking for projects in the same type of way. And just a lot of those things are very similar. And also having been kind of a fly on the wall working on commercial projects when the director's there and the brand is there and the agency is there, you start to, I don't know, these things start to click. Like it's not necessarily this person is good and this person is bad. You're just like, no, they're not right. And I can't even tell you why, but it's not working. And then, everybody kind of sees it. It's like this light bulb went off. But yeah, I think it's really just so interesting how similar casting and actors are in many ways and their kind of experiences and stuff.
Yeah, and I also think it's like, especially for like TV, and probably for commercial too, a little bit, like it is casting by committee. Like it's a
Yeah.
miracle that anything gets cast, to be honest with you. Because, it's sometimes it's not like the best actor wins. Sometimes it's the actor everyone can agree on.
Yeah.
And that I think is so important for actors to know and understand that we're trying to fit as many, we're trying to convince people just as the same that you're trying to convince us. So, we go through our process and we're sending our selects and we have our favorites too that we thought knocked it out of the park. But sometimes it's like beating your head against a wall that they just won't listen to you.
Yeah,
I just
agency is crazy. Their responses of like why they don't want to pick someone or why they want someone it's like sometimes kind of wild.
Well,
Yeah.
and I like watching again, Heather and I worked on a few projects this year where she would put the deck together with the folks that were her favorites and kind of how she would pair them and everything. And I just listening to the whole room, sometimes people are like, "Yep, perfect, great." But then sometimes we go back multiple times and even if it's Heather's favorite or the director's favorite or whoever, the client wants to change, but even sometimes the client doesn't necessarily know
They
who
don't know
they're
what they
looking for.
want. They don't know they know what they don't want, which is,
Yeah.
fine. But they don't quite know what they want sometimes. So that's
Or
yeah,
you
it's just
start thinking you want something specific and then you give
yeah.
it to them and they're like, "Oh, just
Oh
kidding, we
no.
don't want that."
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you have quite a challenging job.
Mhm. Yes,
But
for
it's
sure.
fun. I think it's like as long as you can keep perspective, I think it's really fun to be able to like build a puzzle every, if it's
Yeah.
every week if you're doing episodic or every few months. I think it's a really gratifying way to look at it that and every next piece changes like as soon as you set one down, the next piece needs change based on what you've just set down.
Yeah. Well, Jess and I were talking about the other day on the pod actually about Back to the Future and how they had this other actor originally
Hmm.
cast and Robert Zemeckis was like he was a great actor. He just didn't fit the world. Suddenly we plug him in and it just doesn't make sense. And it's nothing against that, a performer or anything. It's like a mismatch.
Yeah.
hmm
Yeah.
Is there, anything that you feel, if you could pinpoint one thing about being casting director, like what you love about your work, like your favorite thing?
I think when the puzzle part of it for sure, but I also think like being able to the most favorite thing is auditioning an actor year after year after year and it not striking and then finally being able to be like, yes, we found it. This was the run. So that one moment that you finally get to book an actor after so many attempts is really gratifying, but also having a relationship with the filmmaker that you feel like you're respected and that your input has weight. And I've been very lucky the last few films that I've worked on that like the director called me with one thing in his head and then by the time we got on off the phone like the producer called me the next day and he's like I don't know what you said but he changed his mind. I was like thank you. But because I could see the overall picture. I know the essence of these performers and what they're going to bring to the characters, but not only to the character, but the person that we've already cast of like how that's going to match tonally. And so, I think it's like being able to have somebody's ear to understand like the full picture that we're looking at is very valuable.
Yeah, that's so important. And it's crazy too if you, don't receive that because that's literally what you're brought in to do. Like, to be that voice and, you know.
You'd be
Have there
surprised.
have there been any projects that you feel like you just that are highlights or that you feel like you had a really big success or a really big learning lesson
Yes, there's a lot of
that you can share
yeah,
about?
yes, I'll say that Star Wars: Force Awakens, I was the associate on that one, and that was a wild experience of just, like, the magnitude of the franchise, right? Especially because it was the first one back since,
Hmm.
the relaunch of the franchise, and so the preciousness, how much you could do, like, I pitched because we weren't finding what we were looking for, or at least we didn't think we did, because nobody was listening. I put together a whole schedule for an open call that I was traveling for 3 weeks and through the Midwest doing basically like American Idol. That was like the wildest thing that I've done professionally. And I met so many interesting actors that I'm still in touch with now and have cast since that didn't, make it into Star Wars, but like it was such a like phenomenal experience to be able to like find like cherry pick actors from across the US essentially. But so that was a really cool one just to sort of be part of something so massive. And then I will say like I've had some smaller movies that did really well. Like I did a movie that came out this year in theaters called Sketch. And it was just like a really special movie. It was about a family that was mourning together with it was a band of kids and Tony Hale and Darcy Carden. And the director I met through Bad Robot when I was an assistant and like I've known him for a very long time now and this was his first feature. It did really it went to TIFF, it premiered there, then it had a theatrical run and so like seeing people rise to their moment is like a really amazing part of this industry.
Yeah, it so is. Like, Jess and I have known each other for over a decade now, but we only started working together in the last, I don't know, year and a half or something like that. And so it's crazy how you
Wow.
meet people along the way and you never know when is going to be the right time to really collaborate in a certain way. And it could be a decade. I mean, and then, the right timing happens and you get to collaborate. So that's
I
very
really
cool.
I really believe that the universe, kind of lines things up. The stars align in some ways, and there's some luck, but there's a lot of preparation.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting to hear you talk about that. Obviously, like you've made all
Hmm.
these connections over the years, and you're able to pull people in on projects and make some really amazing stuff.
Yeah, I think and that's why I always, especially when I talk to actors, it's always about connecting in an authentic way. Because when you know you have cheerleaders in your corner that like are not there to benefit off of you, you want to pull people into your success, right? So I think that that's the biggest thing. Is like I got so lucky starting my career working on Bad Robot projects. Like I was there for like the first 5 years and then I was working for April Webster for almost 8 years of my beginning of my career. And the fact that I started with her, like had I started anywhere else, I would have had a very different path. But having started there and working with Bad Robot and meeting all of those people because they had like an incredible intern program themselves. And so I got to meet a lot of people on their way up and like still stay in touch with it. I worked on I did some additional casting for Willow, the TV series that now doesn't exist anywhere. Because Disney pulled it from when they were doing their big cleaning moment. But I got that job because like JJ's old assistant was now one of the
Hmm.
top positions at Lucasfilm. So she brought me in through there. And then I was like, oh, there was our main producer from Star Wars was a producer on the show. The partner, JJ's business partner at the time, his assistant was now at a high place. So it was like it was a reunion that I feel like I keep having the same kind of reunion, which is really special. And so that's like the part that I love about this industry.
Yeah, that is incredible. I love that so much because I think too a lot of early career um, you know, kids coming in, I think they're very much like they want to see the return on they met someone and they're like, "Okay, great." And
Yeah.
it's just so much you just making connections. And really, that just means like being open and meeting people and doing great at your job and, just being a nice person. And when the time is right, things will, there's moments all the time now where I have to fill some specific role on a crew. And I go, oh, but I know this photographer in, Kentucky that can do this. And yeah, and I met them all this time ago. And,
Yeah.
so you never know when it'll like sort of come back around and you
I
can like bring
te
those people in.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, like every job I think I've ever gotten is because of somebody I know. And like I think for so many people just making connections. Heather and I talk about this too because we both went to school for our career paths. And granted, they've kind of like changed and stuff, but you put your head down and you're like, I gotta get through. I gotta get the first job. I gotta get the next job. And sometimes you forget to kind of just look at who's around you and
Yeah.
who and just kind of be present and make those human connections
Hmm.
and then you never know when somebody's gonna say, like Heather said, I need a photographer in Kentucky and
Yeah.
So networking
Yeah.
is super important,
Super
but also
important.
diversifying. And you've certainly diversified yourself. I mean, when Heather and I were talking about guests to bring on and she was telling me about you, there's just this whole list of things that you are, and we listed them out at the beginning of the episode, but I do want to talk to you a little bit about a cause for entertainment. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So a cause for entertainment is a organization that I founded in 2014, 2015. It was inspired by my grandmother's breast cancer journey. She was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was later in life for her, and she had some complications with her treatment that, left her in a difficult place. But um, I after that experience, I started getting involved with the Avon Walk for breast cancer. And the first year I volunteered, and then after that I started doing the walk. And I also, at the same time, this is when I just entered in to the industry at the voiceover agency. There was an agent there that had worked there for a decade before I even got there. And there was a new partner that had come on into the company, and whatever happened, she got laid off at this time. And about 6 months later, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She was 39 years old. And that was like an education for me, a very eye-opening moment to see somebody go through that with no insurance, and how much she really depended on these small organizations, that really support women that are going through this journey. So I did the Avon Walk for about 6 years, and about on average I would raise about $4,500 every year. Just, even like just putting my donation link at the bottom of my signature every time I would send an email within the business, like people would just see it and donate, which was really, I mean, really special. And then the last year that I did the walk, I completely destroyed my feet, and I'll spare you the details. I could not do the walk because it's like a 50-mile walk over 2 days. So I couldn't do it. And at the time, Avon had a DIY option that you could host your own event and figure it out. And so I did that. I was coming off the back of Star Wars. And so I had like Bad Robot in my corner, and I had Lucasfilm, and I was like, well, I can make some money off if I can get stuff from them. Like I could make this some money. And so I hosted it. It basically, it was almost like a variety show. Jesse Pyle was our host for the very first year, and we did it at a small bar in Hollywood called the Next Door Lounge, which I don't know if it exists anymore. But we had, it was about 200 people then, 150, something like that. And we had a great raffle and all of this great stuff that happened. And Kate Nash performed, and we raised $18,000 in the first year.
Wow.
So it was like, it became very clear that this was the path forward. I'm like, I don't have to, I'll put my body through different kind of stress this time around. It'll be okay. And so at that point, I started a proper 501(c)(3), and a cause for entertainment was born. And so every year, we have, with the exception of like 2020 due to COVID, and 20, 22 and 23, because of the double strikes in the industry. We have had an annual event every October to raise money for what started off as the Avon Foundation, but now like the goal for me has been to shift gears into the smaller boots on the ground organizations that
Mhm.
are doing the day-to-day work. And so we have donated on behalf of, there's an organization in Sherman Oaks called We Spark Cancer Support Center, and they're not exclusively breast cancer, but that they support not only the patients but caregivers as well. And in the past, in 2019, like leading up to 2019, we had raised so much money. That year, we raised $95,000. And
Wow.
so we were able, like, my dream of dreams is to always do a two-pronged approach to our fundraising, to be able to split the money between research and education and the actual physical support. So in the past, we had done like We Spark with Dr. Susan Love, or another beneficiary that we've worked with now for, I think, 8 years is Shay Sharp's Pink Wishes, and she's our beneficiary again this year. And she does extraordinary work. She was a two-time breast cancer survivor by the time she was 36 years old, and the first time diagnosed at 26. So she had to advocate for herself when she went to the doctor to say that I feel a lump. He brushed her off as, you're too young to have breast cancer. And so she had to go back to another doctor to get checked and everything. And so when she started her journey, she realized a lot of the resources available were for women 40 and up. And I
Mhm.
think things have changed a lot, thankfully. And unfortunately, women are getting diagnosed younger. She started this organization that originally started as like almost like a Make-A-Wish Foundation of like final wishes if you have a terminal diagnosis, but it's grown over the years to something so beautiful. In addition to that, that she takes care of like the day-to-day stuff, like the things that we don't think about, having to pay for parking every time you go for chemo treatment, like the child care, all of those things. And in addition to that, in the case that the woman passes, she then essentially becomes like fairy godmother to her children and makes sure that they have everything they need for birthdays, Christmas, life milestones.
Wow.
And she's really phenomenal. And she was only because she's based in Maryland. So she used to just be strictly in Maryland, and now she's across the country, and also I know has done some work in Canada too. So, and she started a scholarship fund for the kids who lost their mom. So she's doing really incredible work, and we are so grateful that we get to be part of, what supports them.
Gosh, what an incredible organization. I mean, yeah, your organization's incredible. The organization you just described is incredible. And the event is coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about the event? I've heard some things from Heather and it sounds very exciting.
Yes, we're very lucky because Heather has joined our board this year, so I'm very happy about that.
Yay! I'm so happy to be a part of it.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're very excited. It's coming up quick here. Sunday, October 26th at Huron Substation. It is in, I think it's like Atwater Village area. It is from 4 to 8 p.m. And we have the incredible Rachel Harris hosting. You know her from Suits and Lucifer, and I mean, she was just in Leanne. She's a very funny lady, and she's going to be a wonderful hostess. And we just brought on this incredible musical duo, Sheer Element, to perform for the evening. I think it's going to be really special. And we have catering from Gastro Garage. They're a spectacle. In addition to giving you delicious food, they cook it in front of you with torches. So it's a lot of fun, and we also have a big raffle at the event, and a lot of really meaningful moments. So if people would like to attend, you can buy tickets on our website at acauseforentertainment.com. You can find it on our Instagram, links in our bio and stuff. And so come hang out with us. It'll be a great time for a great cause.
Are there any raffle items that you're really excited about?
There's a lot of industry specific things, very exclusive industry experiences, a lot of professional meetings, general meetings with casting directors, pitch meetings with different studios. Point Grey Pictures has donated in the past, which is Seth Rogen's company. I think, just visit our Instagram and keep an eye on the things that are buzzing. It all happened this month.
Lots of
Wow.
exciting things are being announced all the time. for this event.
Yeah.
It's going to
And
be
it's
a blast.
in person, virtual. There's no excuse not to attend.
Yeah. The event will be in person, and then the charity will be virtual, will be online. So you can make an impact in some way.
Fantastic. Well, I just want to end this because I think it's so important, for us all in our industry to get involved in some way, whatever that looks like for you. I think there's a lot of things in our industry overall that, can get lead to burnout or feeling, just a lot of frustrations with a lot of things. And I think that the best way to sort of to prevent all of that from happening is to really just use your talents to give back in whatever that looks like for you. And I don't know. I just want to hear from you, Jessica. Like, how has the process been for you, or have you seen it, the ways in its impact? Of course, the ways in which the organization benefits the recipients, but also the people involved as well, to be able to give back in their community.
Yeah, I think the really important thing for me I was 26, 27 when I started the organization. I mean, not that I'm lush in cash right now either, but I didn't have a lot, and a lot of my friends were in the beginning of their career too. So the thing for me was that we're not a $400 a plate gala. We are an event that's accessible to people. That's always been really important to me. So whether it's with your time, like you want to volunteer. I know Casting Society, they have their own philanthropic side where it's called Casting Society Cares, and you don't have to be a casting director to be part of it. Like as an actor, you can go do a volunteer day once a month if you wanted to. So I think there's so much that people, I mean, this is more of, Heather, you can speak to this more of like you volunteered at our event last year and again at our summer event this year. It's like, what did you take away from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I am the kind of person that I've always been that want to get involved and I want to help, and I just am like, okay, I'm there. But I always try to, look at the situation and say, oh, how can I do something where I'm best using maybe some of the things I'm good at, or the realm that I'm in, to best support a cause that's important. And I was just honestly so moved by the stories that were shared and the way in which, a cause for entertainment supports kind of grassroots efforts, if you will, to meet people where they're at. Because when you receive a health diagnosis, the research that some of these large organizations is doing is wonderful, but it doesn't help you today. So being able to have that direct impact and, kind of give back in ways that you can really see that tangible difference, I think is important, and so important for all of us, whatever industry you're in, but, in ours in particular, to be able to do it with your community and then see the impact is, I think, really incredible. So yeah, I
think
encourage
also
everyone
just
to get involved.
and I think also just being part of something that's bigger
Yeah.
than you. I think that really,
Perspective.
it's perspective, but it just makes you feel so connected to your
Hmm.
community. And I think that's something that we need now more than ever, is to have that foundation. Like even if whether it's donating money or, going to volunteer for a day at a adoption fair for dogs, get your dopamine kick there and and do some good. So I think it's just like finding wherever you can find your happiness, I guess.
Yeah, whatever you're passionate about or what kind of, lights you up and you get excited to support, I think is definitely what you should follow for sure.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, is there anything else that you want to share? Where can people maybe find you or follow you or all that good stuff?
Yeah, I'm super accessible on Instagram, so it's just jshermy with a y dot casting.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, and at causeforentertainment.com, we will link everything in the show notes, so you guys can check it out. Thank you, Jessica, so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's been wonderful.
For being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, that's the show for today. But before we switch back, we want to remind you,
Subscribe to the pod, follow us on social, go to our website, get on our mailing list. It really helps us out a lot. We're a new podcast. So please go like and subscribe to all the things. It means so much to us. Thanks, you guys.
yeah, And give us feedback and stuff. We want to hear from you.
Yeah, let us know what you think, what you want to see or hear on the pod, any ideas, or, reach out to us if you've got some tea you want to share, maybe an experience. We might talk about it on the pod.
All right, see you next time. Thanks for listening to Switching To. It's hosted and edited by Heather Kate Duncan and Jess Boyer. Original music by Top Flow, courtesy of the Pixabay royalty-free music library. Recorded on location in Los Angeles, California. Follow us on social at Switching To Pod. Show notes and transcripts can be found at switching2pod.com.